and welcome back to our series of radical thoughts on innovation. I'm Maya Barber, and as always, I'm here with my co-host John Hall and our special guest Rensl Dillon. Rensl, so we have a few questions for you, but I want to start off because I always hear that innovation can often feel like trying to see around corners. So, how do you often spot the signals, whether cultural, scientific, or behavioral, that tell you where consumer needs are heading next?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I actually have a couple of secret weapons, right? So I'm a scientist true and true, and I kind of block out all the cultural noises, right? But what I've learned is that you can identify friends, family, as well as people on your team who actually are really good at picking up those signals. So, for an example, my wife is one of those early adopters for a lot of things, right? And so she's kind of in touch with the zeitgeist in some ways. So what's odd a lot of times is I become, an expert in, like, say right now, skincare, right? And she already knew so much about skincare before I got the job, right? And had to learn it because she's just kind of in touch with the environment. And there's specific chemists in our R&D organization, as well as in the quality and research organization, quality and regulatory organization, that also have this kind of intuition. So tapping into people like that becomes super helpful. And the reason I say those are secret weapons is you can read, the Mintel reports and the Beauty Stream reports, and all the really well curated, reports from various organizations. But peeking around the corner, you need that plus a little bit of an aha somewhere from somebody to kind of put those two together before you really say, okay, you know what? I think that's the direction we should go in, and then make the bet, right? And you have to make multiple bets as well, right? Because you don't really know which one of them will work out. So that's usually what I would tend to do.
And every pipeline has more ideas than resources. So, what's the hardest decision you've had to make about which ideas don't move forward?
So this is my kryptonite, actually, because I fall in love with ideas way too much, and I fall hard for ideas. So it's really difficult for me to kind of let go. And as I've progressed in my career, I've had to become much more disciplined about letting go of things that I'm in love with. And so I always think of myself as a risk taker, right? So I always wanted to have kind of a lot of these very risky ideas in the portfolio to kind of pursue, but you just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So I've become much more disciplined at, like, 80%, ish is, things that you can deliver, and then, have a smaller percentage of things that you're going to go after. But the one I remember is I really wanted the team to create a transparent zinc oxide sunscreen, right? Which is essentially impossible because zinc oxide is a white powder, right? And I wanted it to be transparent, right? In some way. And there was some interesting ideas about how you can do that. Like with toothpaste, what you can do is you can do refractive index matching and kind of get it, but it's usually silica, it's not zinc oxide. But the thing I regret about that dropping that project was that sometimes when you go after impossible projects, what happens is one level down, you learn something really interesting. And I dropped that project, and now in my new job, we found out about somebody who did something very interesting in the zinc oxide space, and I was like, you know what? I bet if I had kept that project, we would have discovered that interesting thing, because I wouldn't have gotten my transparent product, but I would have learned something really interesting as well. So there are some regrets that I do have, but being disciplined for innovation is really important, because you get pulled in too many different directions, and it's really hard to deliver really great stuff when you're pulled in 50 different directions. So
I want to poke on you. You talked about, seeing around corners and some of your secret weapons. I mean, I think, a lot of times some of the best breakthroughs come from unexpected places. So I'm just curious, has there been a time when there's been a trend, a technology, or an idea that's outside of beauty and personal care that really completely reframed your thinking? I mean, it really kind of took you to a different place than if you kind of stayed focused on your categories themselves.
yeah, so one of the things that is super interesting is that wine, which is kind of weird, right?
Mm.
But Wine. So if you think about wine, right, and you're into wine, you have the aerators, right? Essentially, right? That kind of has a bloom of some sort that is supposed to aerate the wine and kind of make it taste better, right? And one of the things that is kind of interesting, and especially in the fragrance space, is that is interesting to me is that if you think about how scent kind of, or the bloom as they call it, gets done, if you apply a product, you actually have to think about, and aeration is not the right word, but that's the one that clicked in my head to really think about, okay, how can I make sure my formula is going to release that fragrance in the right way? And I always think of this aeration of wine and make this connection. It's like, if you can design formulas in a way that can be like that wine aeration, what is the bloom going to be like that you can really get that beautiful fragrance, right? And so again, it was an obsession for a while, not so much now, but taking ideas from different places, whether it's from the food space, wine space, or even in biotech, for example, has always been a great source of inspiration. If you think about Botox, right, it was completely outside of the beauty space, right? They were trying to solve a very medical problem, and then they discovered, hey, wait a minute, this is stops those muscles from or has the muscles relaxed so that they're not contracting all the time, right? And then there you go, wow, and you have this multi-billion-dollar industry from that one kind of mistake, right? So
yeah. I want to actually kind of pick up on that as a great segue in that, as you know, I mean, great R&D is not linear, and so there's sometimes your best insights come from experiments that don't go as planned. So I'm just curious, I mean, can you kind of share a moment when failure actually accelerated your innovation pathway?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to go back to my favorite example is I'm in grad school, and I worked on, for a guy in beauty, right? But I actually worked on lithium ion batteries at the time. So this is, way, way back in time. I wouldn't say how old I am. But we're trying to get electrolytes to transport the lithium ion because, of course, you want as fast transport as possible. But one of the challenges is in a polymer, right? The ion is essentially interacting, and when you have the charge, it's moving along. But the charge interactions of the polymer is slowing it down. So essentially, what you want is something that can move really fast across there, right? And so one of the ideas we had was, okay, why don't we actually trap the lithium ion in, there's these compounds called crowns and cryptans. Why don't we trap it into this crown or cryptan so you kind of dissociate a little bit? And then now, even though it's slightly bigger, it's not going to be stuck essentially to the polymer matrix, and it will be able to move faster. To do this experiment, lithium, crown or cryptan, solid, solid, and then you mix it together, you get a solid, and then you dump that into the polymer and whatever, right? Okay, mix the two together, and there was this one particular combination. It's not solid, it's not a white powder. It's like it's glass, almost liquid-like. It's like, okay, obviously I did something wrong, right? So you do it again, you mix it, evaporate everything off. It's still this soft liquid. And I was like, what's going on? And that turned out to be a big, big deal for my thesis, actually. Because actually what was happening is because if you think about what's going on is that lithium ion inside crown or cryptan, you would get a solid material most times. But if it had the right size where the ion couldn't actually interact really strongly in the cage, it was bouncing around, it essentially became glass because the structure, there was not enough ionic force to hold the structure because it was just moving so much. And guess what? You put that into polymer, it's still moving around quite fast, which also helps with speed. So it was a pretty cool thing to learn about because it was like, for a long time, I was like, what the heck is going on here, right? This is just messing up my experiments, right? But it turned out to be a really fruitful part of research. So
that's fascinating. Thank you.
And as we all know, wild ideas are exciting. So how do you personally walk the line between encouraging blue sky thinking and making sure concepts stay commercially viable?
Yeah, so at Goodyear, we have a very good program, a blue sky program, where the chemists are able to create whatever they want in terms of a formula in the beauty space. But what is also really interesting is that they come up with the insight and the concept, essentially, right? So they'll discover some insight or some area in the beauty space that's not, very big, and then go and dig around in there, and then they come up with a unique idea in that space. And they present, depending on the year, it could be 3 or 4 times a year, depending. And it's a big deal, right? Everybody comes and they present their formula to a large group of people at the company. And the way that we try to make that commercially viable is we take those ideas that resonate with our clients, brand partners, and we take them from those blue skies, and then we present at what we call our innovation pitches, right? That we do essentially once or twice a year with our clients. And what that does, by the way, is it helps sharpen commercial viability, right? Because the blue sky idea is great, but then you still have to sharpen it a little bit in order to pitch it. And then when you pitch it, the client is responding and you're getting feedback and have to, mold it as well. So that's one way that it really helps us to kind of be commercially viable, because we're actually using it right away with clients in order to try to get business, right? And then there's one other way that we do this, is that we have, in very selective cases, we invest money behind an idea that we really like. So we will invest and say, hey, we're going to get testing on it, or we're going to get consumer data on it, or we're going to get whatever. And then we'll be like, so we're able to take that, and it can either be what we call private label. So somebody can come in, you can come and just buy it right away. Or you can decide that the client can decide, oh my God, the data is so good, I will modify it a little bit and take it, right? So those are the 2 ways we tend to use it. And the commercial lens, I think, helps us to put it into action and monetize the innovation. So it's a pretty robust process for us.
That's really cool. And it reminds me of my Procter days when I was running new ventures in beauty care, and our way upstream technology guys were in a completely separate facility. I went there and just said, if you guys have ideas you want to pitch to me, I was the brand guy. And
Right.
It was fascinating how much pent up energy there was. And I still remember one of my favorite things was, Procter was spending millions of dollars on trying to grow hair. And one of the
Right.
scientists I talked to said, I haven't figured out how to grow it, but I figured out how to stop it from growing. I went, that's kind of cool, because then you could think
Yeah,
about, body lotions that,
exactly.
hair
Yes.
growth, or aftershave lotions to
Yeah.
prevent block shadow. But it was really cool for them to have that voice. And it sounded like you really systemized that to be able to kind of create that and have that consumer lens and have that marketing lens. But
And
I don't think
having the
that's
voice
awesome.
is really motivating for the scientists,
Yeah.
actually, because what happens is they, just like us, right, and more on the commercial side, who are thinking about our return on investment, they don't want to see their ideas die, right? And
Yeah.
so they want an outlet to showcase to the world, and so giving them an outlet is really motivating.
Yep, that's great. And also kind of to the point about the consumers, really kind of getting their point of view as well. I mean, I know there's a tendency to think about consumers in terms of needs or trends and that kind of a thing, but obviously behind that there are a lot of emotions, there's beliefs, even insecurity. So I'm just curious, how are you leveraging that understanding and kind of getting a sense of those deeper human drivers that help drive your innovation process?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, actually. And I think we actually have to get better at this, because it requires, because at a bigger company in my past life, I worked at Colgate. So in a big company, you have inside people and they can help
Yeah.
you dig deeper. In a smaller company, like at Goodyear, who does contract manufacturing, we can see the insights, but the interpretation is not necessarily always there. And so we need to do a better job. But what I would say is, and this to be true, is if you really get at the consumer um, feeling or their wants and needs, then the aha about where to go becomes super, super clear. So the latest example is, it's something super simple. I had an assumption, which was wrong, that in the acne space, right? And I didn't want to get into the acne space because I was like, acne, it's OTC, it's very limited
Mhm.
innovation. Like, why? I don't want to get involved in this thing, right? And then I saw a piece of Mintel data that was like acne and OTCs is less than 50% of the products that are being used in the acne market. And I was like, what do you mean? What doesn't make sense? The OTC products, I mean, there are a lot of great products. I mean, the consumers should be able to pick from one of them. But in talking to the Mintel person, and then, by the way, talking to my 17-year-old daughter, which I should have done in the first place, was like, when you have acne, you obviously try the OTC stuff. And if the OTC stuff doesn't work, you got to find something that works. So you will try anything and you will go to non-OTC, whatever it is, right? And so the big aha is that we know that there's an issue in the beauty industry of matching the right formula to the right person, because we say personalization, but we don't really know how to do it well enough that we can match one-to-one, right? So if the pain is so great that you need a solution, you will try anything. And if you're going to try anything, you'll try non-OTC in order to solve your acne problem, right? And of course, as you know, there are pimple patches and all this stuff. So there's a lot of things that are on the market that would not be considered OTC, but they help, resolve acne issues. And so I think really digging in and finding that thing, that the real pain point for consumers, does open up a lot. And right now, I'm big into, trying to figure out how to give essentially the equivalent of a facelift efficacy from a topical, right? And why? Why is that? Okay, if you want a facelift, you have to have a lot of money, and you have to actually not be afraid of going under the knife, essentially, right? If you look at the people who have facelifts versus not, there's an enormous amount of people who are not going to take that step, but they want the efficacy of a facelift, right? And the question is, okay, we can't do it from a topical right now, but the demand is there, right? If we could figure it out, right? And that comes from the pain point, right? People want really high efficacy. And if they don't have the money or they're afraid to take that step, the demand is there for treatments in the beauty space that I think we need to, especially if more on the topical side, we need to find really creative ways of delivering it from the topical cosmetic side. And I think we have ideas about how to do that. But I think the biggest thing is you have to look at the inside and then decide, okay, I'm going to try to solve that problem, as hard as it is, because at least you'll make money if you solve it. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So adding to that, if you had to bet on one shift, whether in technology, consumer behavior, or cultural values, that would define in the next 5 years innovation in the beauty personal care space, what would it be?
Yeah, it actually comes back to that. And I really thought hard about this. And from the time I got into the beauty space till now, I still believe the one thing that we don't know how to do well, and the shift it exists today, personalization, but we still don't know how to do personalization and matching a formula for that person on what I would say a consumer CPG scale, right? Maybe you can do it with some small pockets where you can afford to spend a lot of money to get some really high-tech evaluation of the microbiome on your skin, on your face, with your dermatologist. But if we could figure out how to match person A with formulas, and I'm not even talking about creating a formula especially for them. There's tens of thousands of formulas out there in the world today. And the person is searching for them, but there's finite ability for them to connect, right? If we could match that, I think that unlocks something really, really special. And I know it's not a new shift, but I think we haven't actually solved the problem. We've said what the problem is, but we haven't actually solved it. So I think if we double down in that space, it would be really interesting. So as an example, in my past job, MIT had a really interesting study where they were able to take data of students in terms of the pH of their skin, and they had some data, but they also took data about the weather and everything that was going on, the period, for example, when they're stressed out, for example, of exams, and they had some preliminary data that suggested they could predict when an acne breakout would happen. Because if you think about it, if you're stressed out, you're not eating well, you're, staying up late at night, and the weather is, such that, your pores are kind of clogged, right? Let's say it's warm or whatever. You could actually predict when this happens. That's pretty cool. So if you can match personalization in this holistic way and match it to the formula, I think, and AI is going to help that. I think we'll be on our way. But that, I think, unlocks a lot for us in the beauty space. So
I think there's so many factors that go into it, because I know during like my skincare routine, during like wintertime and summertime, I use different products because one product stops working after a while. So yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, for sure.
John, do you have any more questions for Rensl?
No, I guess one follow-up on that is just, the whole personalization thing. It sounds like it's almost more the consumer having to be able to diagnose what they want because the solutions are there. Is that what you're saying? I mean, it's really more them being able to.
Well, it's not them because they don't have the technology, right? So we have to provide the technology to them in order to be able to do the match, because the matching right now happens by brand, right? Because if you want to keep within, so you have an analysis and you say, okay, go to my products, which is fine, right? That's what a brand should do. But I'm talking about, like, if you think about AI, huge database of information, that you actually have a really good holistic personalization and an ability to pick from any product on the market and get that match. That will help the consumer so much, because I don't know if you've actually had to look for a skincare product that matches your skin, and everybody I know has spent a long time finding the right thing. And as Maya just said, you find the thing finally for your skin, but then guess what? You change, or the seasons change, and the thing that you thought was working really well doesn't work anymore necessarily as well as it did, and you have to go looking for another thing. So I think that plays a huge part in kind of frustration in the space. And I think we can help solve that. We just kind of need to find the right technology.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a fair point, because I think the categories have gotten so complex too that you could spend hours at the shelf trying to.
You could spend hours looking for stuff. There's so much stuff, right? So how do you know which one is the right one for you that's going to deliver? Actually, my daughter asked me yesterday. Actually, she's like, "Dad, what's the best pore minimizing product for a 17-year-old?" And I'm like, let me get back to you. I don't know. How am I going to know the best one for her, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I can go look at the list. I know the active ingredients. We have some nice pore minimizing formula, but the best pore minimizing formula for her skin, it's really hard to know, right? So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you, Rensl, for coming on today. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned for next month's episode of Radical Thoughts on Innovation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.